Hello, welcome or welcome back to Sapling Tarot and to another episode of The Cards Were Dealt, my interview series about tarot and neurodivergence. This time we're with the lovely Satu from Nine Pentacles from Satu, otherwise known as Satu Bloom over on Instagram. I hope you enjoy. Okay, so would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Satu. I create content geared towards tarot collecting and tarot reading at 9 Coins from Satu on YouTube. And I am a tarot reader and I'm a creative arts therapist based in Brooklyn, New York.
So cool. I love that you've got the therapy angle as well. That's super interesting. So like in terms of your neurodivergence and things like, well, I suppose it's a bit of a big question, but like, how do you identify? Are there any labels that you like or any that you don't? And like, it's totally fine if you don't like any.
I am late diagnosed ADHD. I was actually formally diagnosed last year. And also I've always felt, like a bit of a weird girl, nerd girl, that type of thing all my life, but in my adulthood can finally put some language to at least some of my experiences with trying to navigate the world and navigate life.
Okay, great. So late diagnosis is it's super kind of usual, I think, for a lot of people, particularly kind of women and people of all sorts of different kind of identities that don't fit like the stereotype. So presumably tarot came first in your life if you are only kind of recently diagnosed.
Yeah.
How did you get into tarot?
Well, I got into tarot out of, out of duress. I was entering a few difficult situations in my, early adulthood, mid-adulthood, mid-20s, late 20s, early 30s. And so I started consulting with a psychic, or she calls herself an intuitive consultant, that I really trusted over the years. And I realized in our readings that she was using tarot cards as well as channeling. And I was like, well, if she can use tarot cards, then I could use tarot cards. So I started kind of looking for, a deck that could help me in those in-between moments where I just need an answer and need to process something really quickly and not have to pay a couple $100 to talk to someone. And so, that's kind of like how it began, like all of the major benchmarks in my life, quitting my first job, getting another job, moving states, just all of these kind of big things. I kind of started to rely on tarot to help ground me in those decisions and experiences.
I love intuitive consultant as a name of a service. I think like that is, I mean, everyone needs that. I think everyone needs an intuitive consultant. And that's great that you were just like, wait, what is the tool you're using? And can I do this on my own at home? Can I ask what decks did you kind of like gravitate towards in the first sort of instance of it?
Well, at first I was like, okay, I have to do tarot right. So I got the, traditional Rider-Waite-Smith. But then I started looking at, I think my second deck was the Hoodoo Tarot. Like I wanted something that spoke a little bit more to my spiritual practice and beliefs, and where I could see myself a little bit more, and just seemed to have a lot more like juicy things to explore. So I started with those two, and then it kind of just spiraled out of there.
As it does. Yeah, it's funny like that the Smith Waite is kind of the go-to one for so many people, because like in 2024 that's like, it's such a narrow view of the world. The perspective that it was made from just like kind of barely exists anymore. And so I think it's funny that we always tell people like, if you want to do it properly, you've got to know this system that's X hundred years out of date and only fits like a very narrow range of life experiences. And there's people in fucking suits of armor and stuff, and it's just like, that's less my life.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's cool that the Hoodoo Tarot gave you something kind of a little bit closer to what felt relevant. Do you think that your neurodivergence has affected how you came to tarot, or like how you interact with tarot?
Yeah, I think one of the things I notice about myself more having ADHD is when I have an interest, I tend to like go all in, and so out of all the many other things that I do, writing, painting, roller skating, like whatever, and with tarot, I've also did that same thing where I was like, okay, I'm doing tarot now and I'm getting all the books and I'm getting da 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 and I'm like getting new journals and just like all of those things. And that's also, I feel like, attributed to my collecting as well, of like, I have to find this, strong representation of the tarot. Like, where is it? I have to find it. I have to get it. I have to catch them all. And so I think that's kind of, my neurodivergence is kind of spiraled or manifested in that way, particularly. Yeah, and I also think too. I think tarot and like all of the subjects that fall under the umbrella of tarot and cartomancy in general, there's like so many interesting things to explore. And so that also kind of like, like it's like the endless rabbit hole, I think. And so to always have something to sift through, to learn, other divination systems, for example, like I think that is also really appealed to me and how my brain works as well. Just always just hungry for knowledge and learning and discovery and, all the things.
Well, yeah, I feel that like it definitely is one of those interests where it's kind of the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know, and you can keep going with it. It's the special interest of all special interests, I think, in that way that it brings in loads of topics. Yeah, I think the special interest thing and the kind of bringing it in with other interest is something that I think is quite common to a lot of our sort of neurodivergent pals in the community, and also the collector thing, which I think we all have to kind of like keep half an eye on at times, because like it can get a bit sort of consumery anyway in the community, but then like amongst us with this kind of, there's like the other thing that's happening in our brains, then it's like the gotta catch 'em all, or but this one extra bit of information, and that the thing that comes from the special interest rather than the kind of the just kind of buying stuff thing. It's kind of a hard thing to be like, well, I'm doing what brings me joy and what kind of makes my brain feel good, but also like not wanting to tip into the it's definitely a thing that a lot of us struggle with a lot.
Yeah.
Do you think that your so like ADHD, do you think that has anything, do you think it interacts with how you think tarot works? Do you think that has anything to do with it?
Like, I don't know if it's due to my ADHD, but I feel like the way that I view and use the tarot is different from a lot of people who are maybe in the process of learning nowadays. I think when you're first starting out with tarot, like we were saying in the beginning, like you think that there is a right way to do it. And a lot of people tend to get not fixated, but they tend to really be strict with the meanings of the cards and things like that. And for me, I realized that I couldn't really do that. Not saying that I am a purely intuitive reader, but saying that my intuition does play a strong role in how I work with the cards. And so I think, in that respect, it's just been a challenge because I'm learning with other people that are like, no, the Knight of Cups is this, and no, da, da, da. And I was like, well, I had a dream that
Yeah.
So I'm like trying to use the cards in a way that speaks to me very, very personally. And how that translates outward into the community can look weird.
Oh, I love that though, because like, what if we're all following exactly the same rules? What's the point in there being loads of us? Like,
Yeah.
the whole point of like the reason that I get tarot readings, despite being a relatively proficient, I hope, tarot reader, is that it's you get different perspectives, and different cards mean different things to different people, and like different people just approach things totally differently, and that's the value in it. But I think you're right about like, particularly for beginners, I guess it is a bit like art, that there's a lot of people who think that like you have to learn the rules in order to know how to break them. I feel like tarot is, I mean, there are some people who are just like pure intuitive readers, they've never picked up a book in their life, and all power to them. I think I'd struggle with like the confidence and the kind of imposter syndrome thing if I didn't have any grounding in kind of like typical definitions of stuff. And if I was going purely intuitively. But you're right, I think like having that blend is what makes it kind of magic.
Yeah, I didn't even like when I got books and I had the guidebooks, but and even to this day, I don't really use guidebooks a lot. I started out how I learned was not picking one card and reading the definition and reading everything the writer says. For me, I just jumped into reading, and then I was like, okay, I'm a little unsure what this means. Let me go to the book and confirm or verify. Like that's kind of how my brain worked. I just wanted to do the thing.
Yeah, that
And I'll
absolutely.
figure it out along the way.
Yeah, dive straight in, do a first pass, like what it means to you, and if you need any like additional help, then like going to the book is absolutely how I learned. And like I learned on a weird deck that like my next door neighbor gave me. But so it was weird like doing the book, and then when I eventually did what you did of like, oh well, let's learn it properly, let's go RWS, and then I was just like, the fuck have I been doing for like 10 years? It's fine. But yeah, like just going, I totally relate to that in the kind of the learning by doing rather than necessarily which is, this is where a lot of my autistic peers will totally disown me because it's, that's not, you're not good doing it by the book, you're not learning all the stuff. And then it's like, no, you try and like talk to me about like the rules of a card game or a board game. My brain is just like, it's like radio static. I can't
Do
and
it.
I'll get like angry. I can feel it like building in me, going like, fuck this shit. I just need to just get started and then and it'll be fine. But like, I'm just like, if you don't want me to flip a table, you just need to stop trying to explain the rules to me.
Yeah, yeah. I remember, okay, this is a side note, but like you reminded me of this time where like I went over, someone invited me over to like a friend, like little kickback to play Settlers of Catan. Absolutely never again. Absolutely never again.
Yeah, so I'm with you on the learning by just getting into it. That's really relatable. And I always forget that that's a thing that and I suppose like in the tarot community there are lots of ways that kind of it's sort of like suggested that there's like a right way to do things and kind of a right way to learn things. And if your brain, and I think that's like part of why I wanted to like talk to people about this stuff, is that if your brain doesn't work like that, so like, I know loads of people who they learn by doing the daily draw, like the one card every day, looking in the book and learning the meanings. I know my brain well enough to know that it would make me hate tarot. It would make me hate myself. It would be like, that would be the way for me to ruin an interest for myself. And so, yeah, just the jumping in and getting stuck into it, I think that's really great. And so, like, in terms of like whether you believe in tarot, I suppose this was like a question that I was thinking about because I know quite a lot of people who think in quite kind of black and white terms of, that's real, that's not real. I don't really get that sense myself. But like, do you feel like your ADHD has kind of pushed you one way or the other in terms of whether you believe in tarot and kind of like how you think it works and stuff? If that's a bit much, then like you don't have to get into it.
I feel like, so I think the way I look at tarot, the system I think is very complete. It is a very well-rounded system. And I feel that I believe in the system. However, I also believe in my own inner knowing. And so, for example, like, yes, we know that Ace of Cups can mean, new relationships or new, connections and things like that. But if I'm receiving something that is slightly different, I'm going to honor that first. Like, I believe that, like I believe in spirit. I believe that, my ancestors could be talking to me. My great aunt Cora is not saying, well, let's show her the Knight of Cups because, so I wrestle between like using like the system completely and like using the cards and the art and like my inner knowing, for some reason, those tend to not all the time, but sometimes be in conflict. And so, I also feel like reading for yourself is also it's a bit of a,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a bit of a like tangly area, because I feel like a lot of things that I take out from tarot for myself, I kind of already know, like, Tashawn, did you really need to draw cards for this? Did really. And so I'm now like, I try to be careful about even like the amount that I use tarot. Like I don't read as often as I used to anymore because I want to strengthen my intuition and, kind of not have to use it all the time.
Mm.
So I think that too is like, the cards are the cards. And a lot of people, they focus on the cards, it's, um, they cleanse their cards, they put stones on their cards, which is great. I do it all the time, put oil on my cards. But at the end of the day, for me, they are a tool. And so I feel like I'm the conduit, if that makes sense. So I'm not like saying like, oh, the tarot says. No, I'm saying based on what I'm seeing in the tarot, I don't
That's such
perspective.
a good distinction. Yes. I love that. Yes. You're saying it's not the tarot that's saying. That's so good. I really like that as a difference. I was talking to Sylvie, Tarot Magpie, this morning about we've both been having a run of cards that have basically just been saying the question back to us. And that feels like exactly what you're saying about like, you stop asking me. Like,
Yeah.
stop. Leave me alone. It is winter. Put me somewhere nice. Dust me occasionally. Leave me the fuck alone. Sort your own life out. Do it yourself. Like, I've had that like a good few, like I've been doing the tarot advent thing over on Instagram, and I don't habitually pull cards for myself every day, but I've been doing that, and it's like the cards are saying, the fuck is this? This is not the relationship we have. No, you appreciate me for my art and my pretty body. You don't expect, we don't do this. We're not friends that talk every day. This is not us. But I really like that. The idea that you don't read as often because you want to be like strengthening that. Yeah, I think that that's really valuable. And again, it kind of butts up against this thing about like how people think you should be doing tarot. It's like you should be pulling cards every day. And it's like, I don't speak to my therapist every day.
Yeah.
I couldn't afford that, but like, I don't feel like I need to. And I think that's like the thing that I've come up against with the idea of like having a daily tarot practice in any shape or form. Like my kind of gut just says like, I don't feel like I need that. I don't know. That doesn't feel necessary or like good to me, but I really, yeah, I can see it as using it as kind of and I'm not saying that this is what people who use a tarot every day think, but how it could become a thing where it's like you're not confident in your own sense of knowing and making decisions and being able to trust your gut, and so you're kind of leaning on an external factor. I think that that's a really good point.
Yeah, I noticed like in my most stressful moments, I was pulling cards constantly. And that practice, and it's different for everybody for sure. But for me, that practice enabled the anxiety. Like I was just feeding the anxiety by drawing cards, asking the same question over and over again, this and that. And again, like we were saying, how like the cards, bounce the question back to you. My soccer cards, when that happens, are it's either the Wheel of Fortune and the Chariot. Either my team is like, "Girl, you're good, Chariot," and then they're like, "Girl, we don't know what's the load with the Wheel of Fortune. What will happen? Will
So
happen." And so that kind of led me to like, what? Okay, I'm gonna just lay this aside and like go meditate or something. Like I, incorporate some other practices that can help my anxiety, which can then help me navigate the situation.
yeah, and to just bring a bit more kind of clarity. Yeah, I love that. The Wheel of Fortune's my birth card, and it always feels like a slap in the face when it comes up. It's just like the shit happens card of just like, why are you here? It's like, just, you know that it'll be all right in the end. Like it'll sort itself out. But like, yeah, no, that's, and the Chariot as well. Just like, it's fine. Keep moving. It's too real. But yeah, like, and the different practices as well of things like meditation. I know that not everyone can do meditation. There's been like parts of my life where like meditation really wasn't the right thing for me to be doing, but like I think if it is possible, then it is a really great thing for like, because you were talking about tarot grounding you, and I
Yeah.
think that tarot can sometimes do like the opposite of that. It can kind of pull you off into some other kind of alternate space. And so yeah, finding the things that that do ground you is like, yeah, that's super important. Do you feel like tarot helps you better understand your brain and your kind of neurodivergent experience?
Hmm. You know what? I would say yes, that I've learned a lot about myself based on how my practice has changed over time. Like at first I was feeling, with especially with ADHD, like there's a lot of shame in not doing things, like well or on time or this and that. And so I think the journey that I took through tarot allowed me to come to a realization that how I am is how I am. And like, that's okay. And so I think in that respect, like that bled over into other parts of my life, especially since I got diagnosed. Before I got diagnosed, I was like, oh, what's wrong with me? Like, I can't concentrate. I can't do that. I can't do this. But then, being diagnosed allowed me to be like, okay, so this is a thing. And so here are the things I'm going to do in my life to navigate this thing. And it was a strengthening that happened after the diagnosis. And I think tarot definitely helps in that, practicing how to tailor routines that actually work for me instead of routines that are generalized for everyone. And so, yeah, so just taking ownership of that, of like my identity, who I am, yeah, I'm a mess. Yeah, and what?
I identify as a mess, thank you.
So, yeah.
I think that's quite a normal response to a lot of the kind of the diagnoses that come under the neurodivergent umbrella, which is that people get really shitty about like, the influx of diagnoses that have been happening over the past however many years. And it's like, oh, why do we have to have labels? And it's just like, well, we were already labeling ourselves. And the world was already labeling us as fucking lazy and messy and flaky and all of these things. Like, we already had to deal with all of these things. And they were things that were like wounding us, like right down, that were like making us feel like this big all the time. And I think so, like, to take on a label that is like a neutral, like it's just the way that you're wired, is, it's part of who you are. And, some people would, maybe feel differently about that, but kind of it's part of that, I think, is the kind of the letting go and the unpicking of those old wounds and the labels that kind of came with them. I think, yeah, I can see how tarot is a really valuable resource for being able to kind of look at those things in kind of a self-compassionate way rather than like a kind of critical nitpicking way.
Absolutely.
But like you say, we can be messy, and that can be, again, that can just be neutral. It's just part of how we're still doing things. We're still showing up and doing what we need to do. We're just 5 minutes late, and in my case, I've not washed my fucking hair or whatever. Like, it's, like, I'm still here. It's fine. So, because of being, like the kind of the different wiring and stuff, have you found and kind of identified any challenges in regard? I'm just going to read my thing because I can't do this seamlessly. Relating to like traditional or like more mainstream tarot interpretations, including things like archetypes and like collective symbolism. So like things that, like you were saying about, some people at one point agreed that the Ace of Cups means XYZ. I loved it. You could just like pull it out of your brain. And you were saying, because obviously we all know that like the Ace of Cups means, and my brain just went, bleh. It's like, I don't fucking know. I'm glad you've not paid to be here, because fuck knows. My brain just went like, nope, that's not what we're doing right now. But like, in terms of like kind of collective symbolism and things that feel like they were agreed on by people at some point, because you were saying like it's the duality of the system works, the system is complete, but also if you're feeling like that, you're channeling spirit or ancestors, or kind of, I have quite like an animistic viewpoint in that there's like spirit in everything and like that kind of stuff. If you feel like that's what's talking, then it can be a bit like, what do you listen to? So like, yeah, are there any like symbols or kind of collective agreements that you sort of find yourself kind of coming up against?
I think the only thing for me is, and this has come up in like my semi-professional practice, where people who also read have questioned how I do spreads. And so I don't do reversals. And it's really purely it's two things. One, it's a sensory thing. I really don't like reading cards upside down or leaving one card this direction and this card this direction. Like I can't do that. But two, it just didn't feel, it felt too stringent to be like, this card is upside down, then this means, I was like, no, let me just look at the card and look at the context and then figure it out. So I want to be more fluid. And so I had to explain that a couple of times to a couple of clients who also read, like, oh, wow, all of your cards are upright. That's funny. And I was like, no, it's not. I shuffle upright. I don't read reversals. It's fine. Sit back, relax.
You don't be paying attention to what my cards are doing.
Yeah, I think for me, that's the only thing that I bump up against, because I know that some people, definitely rely on reversals, and that's like no shade at all. Like that's how you read is how you read. But when we're talking in communities, sometimes it can be like, like you interpret a spread differently because someone has strictly said, okay, this card shows up this way, that means it's this way. And I was like, well, let's also so yeah. But no, I think that art, especially being a therapist, I'm a drama therapist specifically. Looking at the archetypes is really interesting to me, and I really find, especially like the major arcana, is very thorough. I mean, you can find different synonyms for the different names, maybe, but the archetypes that exist in our culture are every time a creator creates a tarot deck and they have, they bless us with 2 or 3 extra cards, I'm like, okay, great. But then I look at the cards and I'm like, I don't need them. They're beautiful. I love it. I think we're good with these 22 major arcana, So I've never really been in contention with that. I think archetypes are just something that are just so salient in who we are in humanity, and may manifest in different ways, but in some way, they're always the core of some particular idea. And also too, I learned Rider-Waite Smith or Smith-Waite. I started exploring more PIP focused decks, Marseille, playing cards, because I wanted more flexibility in the minors. So that has been really cool and helpful for me as well. It helps me to customize my reading, and it helps me to customize my cards and get to know my own understanding of things, and also practice like my numerology. All of those things. So and it's great because the tarot, there's so many ways, like there's so many systems, like Lenormand, you look at a bear, like a bear is a bear is a bear. You look at Smith-Waite and the symbols of Smith-Waite, you look at the Thoth and you dive into the esotericism. Like there's so many things under the cartomancy umbrella that I think something is gonna reach somebody. And for me, it's been more kind of PIP focused, kind of free flowing, like, cards that give me space to move around a little bit. So yeah, I'm not sure if I answered your question.
No, I think you absolutely did, because I think I agree. I also don't read reversals for very similar reasons, with the additional thing of my professional readings, like kind of in real life, I sit opposite someone on a table. And my brain simply cannot compute which way round it would be reversed. Like, if they face me, then they can't be, and so like my brain and I'm sure there would be an answer. I'm sure there are millions of fucking tarot readers that would say, no, if it's facing whichever way, that means it's reversed. My brain refuses. It's just like, well, it's not though, is it? And so I just turn them the right way up.
Also, too, some people pull cards like vertically, like, so if you pull a card like that, you're turning the card upside down as opposed to pulling the card this way. And so what is the right way to pull a card to, if you work with reverse, there's just a lot. So I'm like, you know what? It's fine.
Yeah, and also like, I feel like in the context of a spread, my point is always like, you'll know if something is like out of balance. So if something is kind of giving you, it's sort of a really like, I don't know. I mean, I also don't totally understand reversals, because it's like, but you can't. Anyway, I won't go off on a tangent about reversals. I'm with you, basically. I agree 100%. If people read reversals, that's very cool. Can someone maybe politely explain to me how to do that in a way that doesn't engage my like demand avoidance brain? So you were talking about you tend to approach your decks as kind of more like tools rather than in that kind of very sort of kind of sanctified way that some people do with the cleansing and the crystals and the silk and the everything. Do you have any kind of rituals and practices that connect to your like tarot practice in a way that like accommodates your needs, whether they be like sensory needs or kind of routines or just particular ways that you like to read the cards?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, like I do like cleanse my cards physically if they're secondhand, like, give them a little rub down, a little sanitation. And I think the act of cleansing the actual cards is really helpful in preparing to use the cards. Like it's the ritual, going through the ritual. When I use oils, it's like I am connecting with the deck in that way. But also too, I mostly focus on cleansing myself. So I try to, make sure that I'm clean when I read, that I am not in a state of like overwhelming anxiety. Like for me, I decided not to read in those moments. It's just not helpful. So getting my mind right for a reading, am I presentable? That's typically how I do. Like I want to feel like, okay, we're doing it, as opposed to,
Yeah.
oh, like, so yeah, for me, it's about like, where am I at spiritually? Am I ready to read spiritually? As opposed to, are the cards ready to be read? That makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really good like piece of advice, really. I think for anyone reading tarot, it's like I know that people do read in moments of desperation and anxiety and all sorts of stuff. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I think particularly if you're reading for other people, but also if you're reading for yourself, if you can try. My thing is always about like just for one reading, could you give it a go? To really kind of present yourself to the cards kind of thing and be like, I'm here, I've washed my hands, I've done all that kind of, I've done that. And yeah. So when you talk about using oils on your deck, so you've mentioned that twice now, and so I'm going to give in and I'm going to ask you, how does that, so do you put it on your hands and then you...
Yeah, I use this is 7 African Powers oil. It's an oil that is meant to just protect and cleanse, and so I love the smell of it. I put it, day to day. I dab it on my head and on my neck, but for tarot cards, I just like take a little bit and then rub it on my hands, and then I just start just using the cards, shuffling them, flipping through them, just like getting the scent on there. Tactfully. So it just helps me, I don't know, just like, I'm like, and then after the scent is applied, I'm like, okay, these are my cards now.
Absolutely. I love that so much.
No one else's cards smell like this.
Yeah, exactly. And then like
Yeah.
even if you ever decided to like part with that deck, there'd still be like just a little bit of you that's kind of going out into the world to be like, these are always going to be like, good readings and stuff. Like it's always sending that like nice little bit of, I don't know, kind of magic out into the... That's really cool. I have never thought about doing that. My decks are probably just like covered in hand cream, which is like my equivalent, but that just sounds kind of gross rather than being like, oh, I involve oils in my deck. Sounds really like lovely and elegant and stuff. And I'm just like, oh, I probably just like, smell like my hand cream.
Honestly, I think the best way to spiritually cleanse a deck is to just use it, use the heck out of it. Like when I go to a reading or when I watch a YouTube video and someone's like using a deck that's like just falling apart, I'm like, I get so excited. I'm like,
It's
oh
the
my God,
best. Yeah, absolutely.
use it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's like that thing about like a really old book.
Mm-hmm.
There was a thing of like when I was a child, you could always tell the books on the bookshelf that my mum really loved because she'd probably dropped them in the bath because she'd been like there reading them so like gripped that she hadn't been able to stop, and then it had just gone in and you'd be able to see be like, that's a loved...
Yeah.
It's a loved book, it's a loved deck, it's a I think about like childhood kind of cuddly animals and stuff, like they are loved, and you can tell because they look a little bit worse for wear, but it's
Yeah.
out of love. No, that's really cool, and I really love the idea that kind of your decks have like a signature sense. Like that's so like classy and cool. While we're on the sensory thing, do you have any sensory preferences when it comes to tarot decks?
Yeah, it's not a deal breaker, but I'm a riffle shuffler, so I like to riffle and bridge. So if decks are too stiff, I'm like, okay, I guess. Like, I don't really have fun using them. I also kind of don't like the sound that matte cardstock makes against each other. It's hard for me. And everyone, like, there was a period of deck creation where everyone was like matte and borderless, and I'm like, could we could we not? Not to say I will, like, I have plenty of matte decks, but I'm just like, oh, I love linen cardstock. I know that that's also a very divisive thing, but it seems so flexible, and I love feeling the texture of it. Feels really nice. So I love linen. Yeah, but all I need for to read with are some cards that are like moderate, not too thin, not too thick. I can shuffle them, and yeah. Oh, I don't really like small cards. So like, how everyone has like a mini deck or a travel deck. I don't really subscribe to small decks. I just don't. I don't know. I have no reason for that. I love larger cards. So either like tarot size or larger. I'm like, if it's really big, I'm like, okay. But if it's like 7.5 by 3.5 by 5.75, I don't know. Whatever that NPC measurement is for like really big cards.
Right, okay. Yeah.
Like, because then you
Yeah,
get
let
to
me see
really,
the artwork. Yeah.
yeah, you just see the artwork and like just immerse yourself in it a little bit. Yeah, so I'm more of a larger card person. I do have longer fingers, so um,
Help.
yeah. But yeah, I think those are really it. There are some cards that have really weird smells, and that also, I'm like, okay, we got to oil them, the mess out of this thing, because yeah, the printer scent sometimes lingers for a long time, and that kind of distracts me sometimes as well. But
Yeah, that's
yeah.
exactly what I was thinking when you were talking about using scented oils, and I was just like, okay, I can see 3 decks over on the shelf that could do with that, because yeah, like it doesn't seem to matter like how much you use them. I think particularly with the linen finish seems to be the ones that smell the strongest to me, and that is not something that many people mention in reviews.
True. That's
Like
true.
that deck smells real funny, and
Yep.
it's not very pleasing, but that is, yeah, that's such a good idea for getting rid of that. And I agree on the matte cardstock. I think visually it's pretty, and like I understand that like a lot of people have moved away from wanting things to be super kind of glossy, shiny. But yeah, I agree. Like the noise and the feel of the cards rubbing together is not good. I agree that it's also not a deal breaker. Some of my favorite decks do have that stuff, but it's like I like you despite the fact you're the matte cardstock that makes that kind of frictiony noise. But yeah, I agree. So, what do you wish someone had told you when you were first diagnosed in terms of, I don't know, advice or comfort or any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think for me, I had to switch perspectives. I think, you know, in my journey, like it was weird, and I think this happens to a lot of neurodivergent women and folks who identify as women, that they grow up, they're the gifted kid, they, somehow ace everything. I never had to study. And then all of a sudden, my life is falling apart as an adult. Like, where did this come from? And so when I realized I was experiencing these issues, my thought process was, I have to fix this. I have to fix it so that I don't have these issues anymore. Since becoming diagnosed and be able to talk more about the symptoms of ADHD and just, about neurodivergence in general, it's allowed me to be like, this is how, like you said earlier, this is how my brain works. And I'm going to set the world up to revolve around that, instead of me trying to revolve around the ways of the world. So, for example, like I graduated not too long ago from grad school, and it was crazy because I was like, why can't I just like not do this paper last minute? Like, why am I up at 2 a.m.? It was frustrating. So then I was like, you know what? Instead of trying to not do that, why don't you just look at the project and set small benchmarks? So, 12-page paper, okay, do section one, by Wednesday, do section 2, by Friday, do section 3, and that was immensely helpful. So it wasn't like discarding the fact that, I do have an issue with procrastination. It just was rather, okay, I'm working within that. I know myself, and so I have to like do small little chunks of things in order to get them done. So yeah, so I think that perspective shift, or, just someone telling me that, yeah, it's okay for you to be this way, I think would have been helpful. And also too, like, I feel like I'm more able to advocate for myself. So thinking back to like when I was in grad school and, I would completely blank out on what was just said. I started raising my hand like, hey, I didn't catch that. Could you repeat yourself? I don't have to say, oh, well, my anything, I didn't have to say all of that. All I said, look, I missed that. If a teacher was like, did anyone do the reading? I'd be like, no, I didn't. What like I became very transparent about where I was at, because that was the only way that I could ensure my own success in that endeavor. If I was to sit there and pretend like everything was fine, pretend that I heard the lecture, pretend like I did read, now I'm like trying to fake like I read it, that creates more problems for me. And so I focus on the ease of living with how I am, rather than trying to just fix it or pretend like it doesn't exist, if that makes sense.
Absolutely makes sense. Yeah, I think that is, and I think that's something that like truly anyone would feel, or that I think is valuable to anyone to think about, in terms of like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with you. You don't need to be fixed. Here are the tools you need in order to build a life that works around you. And we have to navigate a system, or many systems, in a world that isn't built for each of us individually. And that is difficult, and for many people inherently traumatizing. But like, you're not the thing that's wrong. And yeah, I think being able to advocate for yourself like that is, I mean, that's fantastic. I think being able to be more honest, and like, yeah, I think at the beginning you said about it being about like just getting to know yourself, and like, you know yourself now. And I think that it's such a kind of a gift in a way to be able to know that bit about yourself, and to kind of be able to try and approach it without judgment, and yeah, to just know yourself better. And I know that these things happen as we get older anyway, but I think that something like a diagnosis and the community that comes with it, I think, because for many like types of neurodivergence, there aren't like treatments or medications or whatever. So what you have is a community of people going kind of, oh, well, look, this is a thing that helped me. We have the same label. It might work for you. It also might not. Like the kind of the chunking things and creating little milestones, I think is a really, really valuable tool for lots of people. And then for lots of people, they'll kind of try and go like, no, there's still deadlines. And I know I made them up, so I'm going to ignore them. That's my brain. But like, I know that it's a really valuable thing to do, and to kind of chunk things like that is really great. But that kind of self-knowledge is, and I suppose that's where it kind of ties in with tarot, in that lots of us get into tarot for self-knowledge. And that's a whole thing. Like, that's kind of the way that tarot is branded now, is the kind of personal development and reflection and stuff, rather than any of the other reasons that people have been doing tarot for however long. But that's really great. I love that you were able to take that on board and start advocating for yourself. You know, it's shit that you have to, but like, it's good that you were able to. What do you wish someone told you when you first got into tarot?
I think, you know what, honestly, like nothing. Like, don't, this may be a little controversial, but I don't believe, I think that mastery does not need to come from someone teaching a certification course. And I just don't, I think it's deeper than that. And I just feel like what I enjoy about tarot is the self-discovery, the digging for gold and finding it myself, as opposed to someone like, here's the gold and here's all you need to know. Please give me money. It's not for me. I I am admittedly critical of people who do kind of use that model of mentorship, but really want to find out things for myself. I want to have these epiphanies that are personal for me. I want to have these discoveries for me. And I think that's probably why I do read tarot books. I do, like, don't get me, I do read tarot books, but I tend to like jump around because when a light bulb pops up, I'm like, oh, let me go to this section because I have a question or I have a thought or an idea about this topic, as opposed to reading a book beginning to end. I don't think I've ever read a tarot book very linearly at all. Like, I've always just been like, no, I want to learn about
Yeah.
numbers, you know? So yeah, I would say, like, a lot of people think when they first start that they have to learn from someone. And I would tell, if they asked me, I would tell them, like, yes and no, like, not in the way that you think.
Mm.
Don't underestimate yourself and your own inner knowledge. You know, don't fully depend on someone else to tell you how to read. Like, you have the power to develop a practice that works for you. Yeah, I think that's what I'll say.
Love that.
Yeah, because some people think they need that support, and that's fine. But if they were to ask me, I would say you can do it, like, and do it in a way that works for you at the pace that you want it to. A lot of people, try to rush through and, like, oh my God, I can't seem to understand the meanings, and I've been reading this book, and it's learning to accept your own pace of things will, like, make the journey a little bit more smoother and less burdensome, I think. So yeah,
Definitely.
I'll say that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really great piece of advice. I can see some people being frustrated by that because I think there are a lot of people who do kind of just want to be given the answers, and like they're the kind of people who like kind of come up to me and be like, "Oh, imagine like learning 78 cards." And I was like, well, the things I did one of those diplomas, which is hilarious. I have a tarot diploma. I don't talk about it. The fuck is a tarot diploma? But like, I think learning 78 cards or kind of being given like the definitions of 78 cards, it's not how my brain learns things. Learning 78 separate things, nope. That's
If you told me what the Fool meant, if you told me to my face, looked me in the eye and said, here's what the Fool means, it would literally just bounce right off my skull. But if I'm reading and it pops up in answer to my question, then I'm like, okay, I think this means, then I'm looking at the imagery and I'm like, okay. And then it goes. So that's how, and I think that's okay. Like,
yeah.
it has to be okay. Like, um, yeah, we just learn differently. And I think the more that we acknowledge how we learn, how we process information, especially like not just in tarot, but just in life in general and all different facets of life, I think we'll all have an easier time getting through this thing called life.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting thing because it's like I suppose it brings up the question of like why are people getting into tarot? Is it because they want to be someone who like knows tarot, or is it because they're like in it for like the nitty gritty? And I'm not saying that one is better than the other. It's just that I suppose depending on what you want to get out of it, you kind of need to approach it in a bit of a different way. And I think the way that you approach it with kind of these different strings of where you get information from, but like most of all coming back to that sense of inner knowing, I think that speaks to what you're trying to get out of the tarot as well. And so like I suppose that's what people need to figure out, which is probably not very satisfying if someone's just like, how do I learn tarot? And we're just like, where?
There's so much in it. And there's even, people who are like, I want to learn how to divine the future. And there's other people who are like, I want to like journal and process my life, And so there's so many like entry points to the tarot that if you do have a community of people that you learn with, making sure that those objectives are aligned, or else you're not going to have a good time learning.
What would make the tarot community feel more inclusive or accessible for your ADHD and kind of neurodivergence?
Think, I mean, I don't necessarily know the exact answer to this question, but my first thought went to the landscape that is like the world of the consumerist side of tarot decks collecting. I feel for me, because I think that's something that a lot of people like wrestle with, and I had a thought the other day of like, there's so many different types of decks, very interesting niche concepts of decks. And I would like to see creators who are interested in creating tarot decks to see how they can build a tarot deck that has a more generalized, I guess, use. So I enjoy more of the like let's say if someone said, look, I have money to buy one deck right now. I'm not going to buy the deck that is about dinosaurs ruling the earth. I'm not going to buy, like, I just want something that I can use on the day to day. And they only had, like money for one deck. More of those for those. For me, my collector brain kicks in and I love the niche stuff. But when I was first starting out, I was a little overwhelmed when I started veering away from the writer publication of the tarot. I was like, can I read with that? Even the Hoodoo tarot caused me a lot of issues because the pictures, were so different. It took me I actually returned to the Rider-Waite-Smith and then I went back to the Hoodoo tarot and I was like, you know. So I guess, also too, I think affordability is an issue as well. I appreciate that artists value their work, but also I think we have to think about the community too, and the community that we are a part of. If you are a part of that community, because and I say that because I feel like there are some creators who are in the community who read tarot, who are tarot practitioners, and there's some creators who are like, I am an artist who would like to explore the tarot. And I think there's different objectives with that, and that can also affect how one values the product of a deck. I've received better quality in an independent deck that cost $40 than I did for a deck that I paid $100 for. I think being explicit about affordability, I think would be helpful for people who want to support artists. I'd be like, oh my gosh, this artist is so cool. I'll get it. I'm that person. But I think if we're going to be a community, let's be a community, and not just a collective of consumers.
Ooh, collective of consumers. There it is. There it fucking is. Yeah. No, I feel that because I agree about I think also because it's the mass market prices have been pushing up and up and up.
Yes.
And I wonder if that's because there are people at those publishers that have seen what we are prepared to spend, or, what members of our community are prepared to spend on a deck. And like really, I suppose we need to knuckle down onto like why are we prepared to spend that? For some people it is, because that's an artist and I want to support. I suppose it's kind of like the Kickstarter mentality of technically you're not actually purchasing a product, you're putting money towards a creative project. And like that is a very different thing than if you go to, Hay House or whatever and you buy a deck from them, because you're not kind of investing in a person or a kind of a creative or something. And we all, I think a lot of us are kind of creatives in various ways. We know it's fucking hard, and so like we want to be putting our money out to that thing, but it's like, why? And I agree, I have like a pet peeve about the artist who decided to make a tarot deck but doesn't necessarily know anything about tarot.
Yeah.
The only reason it's a pet peeve is because I've been bitten by it on like a number of occasions where I'm just like, oh, this art is so beautiful and it's giving me nothing.
Yep.
Yeah. It's just sad and it's disappointing, and like that's why I'm a Grinch about it. It's not the artist's fault, but like I have an issue with it. But I agree.
Yeah, I mean, and I can't complain too much because I thank God for artists.
Thank God, 100%.
yeah, I'm so thankful that there's so many people who can draw. Like I use photography. I've created my own like Oracle decks based on my photography. But if I could draw, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Like so I'm really grateful of like so many people putting their art out there and using the tarot to really kind of put form to their ideas and conceptualizations about the world. I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm not a millionaire.
Yeah. And that's it. And that's where particularly the neurodivergent kind of collectory special interest thing gets real difficult real fast. Because, like, sure, okay, there are members of the neurodivergent community who are billionaires at this point. It's not most of us. Most of us are, in some way, kind of disabled, if just by the system or in other ways. Like, we're not out here making all the money. So that's not on artists to make up the shortfall, but we can still be sad that we can't have all the nice things that make our brains do the nice fuzzy thing. And I think that's fair. Both things can be true at once. We want artists to be paid what they're worth, and it's 78 pieces of art and all that kind of stuff, but we can still also be like, I'm not made of money.
Yeah.
It's hard to balance those things. And yeah, collective of consumers is such a thing, and something that I really try to not participate in, but also it's like it's really hard not to. Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, I can feel my brain just like kind of chuntering away on that, going like kind of there's some big thoughts there to be had in like 3 to 5 business days. I'll be back to you.
Reality, I personally do not feel, yes, do I love to shop? Yes. Am I a Taurus moon who loves nice, luxurious things?
Nice.
Yes. That bled into my tarot practice 100%. But I've learned to take ownership of the fact that I am a collector and that this is what I love. And now, and similar to, accepting my neurodivergence, once I have accepted that, like this is what I'm doing, now I can be honest so that I can then create parameters for myself and systems for myself that will manage this activity. If I were to sit there and pretend like, oh no, I'm not gonna, this is it, I'm not buying another deck. Like, I know I'm gonna buy a deck. I know I'm gonna buy something each month, every paycheck. So so to be in denial of that, I think for me personally, it just hasn't been helpful. So I fully take responsibility.
Yeah.
And I like it. I like, when people come over and I'm like, look at this one, look at that one. It's really cool to talk about, but yeah, I don't even know what I'm talking about. I'm just saying like, yeah, I think not, I think there's a lot of guilt and shame, I think in the collector conversation that has always made me feel uncomfortable. And so I'm trying to conduct my life and all of my hobbies without that shame, I guess is what I'm saying.
Big time. Yeah, completely. I feel that. And it's about that thing of like, if you don't, I know lots of people who, they just don't look at their bank balance. They never look at it. And it's like that thing of, if I don't look at it, it won't be real kind of thing. And so, but I think it gets to a point, I think most of us have some kind of point where, willingly or unwillingly, we get made to, look at the cold hard truth of it, and it's what you do from there. And, the making the parameters, like you say, that I think is what keeps it, safe and healthy and all of that kind of stuff, like with any interest. And it's the difficulty with having multiple interests as well, because it's like kind of, well, I've got a $60 tarot deck, or, you were talking about like, roller skating and painting and all sorts of stuff. Like, if you do photography, like that's not a cheap hobby to have. And like, you just got to keep it balanced. I have like I don't know, it's like a hand-drawn like spreadsheet thing in my journal that's like special interest purchases in different categories. And like the categories shift and change, and I do it, like kind of either quarterly or every 6 months or something, and I write them all down. And next year I'm going to start putting the prices next to them, because I've realised that is part of the issue. It's like, well, no, I'm buying fewer things, but the individual things are more expensive. Have we won?
Yeah.
Have we won?
It's those little things, like that's a really great idea of like thinking about all of your interests holistically. Because in my brain, like tarot is one thing, the painting is one thing, the photography is another thing. So I'm making purchases. Even if I'm still having parameters around each one, I'm still making purchases
Mm.
across the board. And so that of course affects the practicality. So like, yeah, I think that's so key that I'm going to take away is like, no, I got to put all of this together if I really want to budget, you know.
Do you have any resources you would recommend for either just like other neurodivergent tarot readers, or, I mean, I guess we've talked about people wanting to learn tarot and just like get a fucking deck and start reading.
Yeah.
Godspeed, you know.
Honestly, like I feel like, you know, and this has been happening, like I'm a part of Discord community, for example, that is really like they, you know, yeah, let's get a few of us on Zoom and like talk about, you know, this particular cartomantic topic. When you have conversations with real people who are having a similar experience with you, I think that is so powerful and so needed. And I think it's just very valuable. So I feel like if it's something that you want to start out on, like seek community. That's how I got started on YouTube. I was like watching these YouTube videos, trying to, you know, look for like the deck. And then I realized like, wow, this is like a bunch of people doing this. And like, yeah, it was just really interesting. So that kind of was my entry point into tarot community and my desire to like want to connect and just like talk about stuff, not necessarily from a point of master student or teacher, you know, student, just from like, hey, we are peers trying to figure this thing out together. There's no book in the world, I think, that can be more valuable than having those connections, those like just chill connections of like, yeah, like let's just talk. And, you know, just like how you were mentioning the spreadsheet that you were doing, like just that, you know, those types of things being brought up in these like kind of smaller chill gatherings. It's like, yeah, I just learned something today that I can apply. That's kind of the type of learning that I enjoy, and might be helpful to other people who can't pick up several books and read from or pay for a course or so and you know, especially in the spiritual community generally, it's a stressful thing to find people that you can learn from and also trust. And so I think for me it's easier to look at peers, to look at this, you know, having these types of these relationships rather than this type of relationship, because
Definitely.
this is scary for me. But
Yeah.
yes, let's meet up for coffee, let's meet at the park, let's on Zoom, let's do it, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that kind of more like lateral thing, like kind of non-hierarchical thing, I think is definitely, yeah, because like you say, you know, about like the courses and the, you know, people thinking that's the way to learn, but it's like we have no governing body. There's no big great council of tarot readers where you have to go and get your badge or whatever. Like, we're all making this up in the most kind of deep and wonderful way, but also in the lightest and silliest of ways. You know, I have a book called like Divine Your Dinner or whatever, and it's different recipes for like, you know, you pull a tarot card, this will give you a recipe of what you should cook for dinner. And I'm like, just like, exactly. We're all silly little geese, but we're also incredibly deep and like all of this stuff. We are both.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I can't put anyone up on a pedestal that, you know, because I think in order to sit up on that pedestal, you have to shed all of the light-hearted stuff and you have to be more serious. And I'm just like, it's a hobby. We're
Yeah, it's
supposed to be having fun.
it's supposed to be empowering. It's not supposed to be intimidating. Like if you come to tarot and you feel intimidated,
Yeah.
you know, like get to a point where you don't.
Yeah. Find the right people. Find people who won't kind of egg that on and be like, oh yeah, you should be afraid. And we're all kind of like magic and mystical and we know something you don't know. And it's like, yeah, because we learned it. Here's how you can learn it. Like, here's the tools. We're not gatekeeping anything. No, I think I think community as being like the resource, really. Getting into, I mean, anything ever, but like this in particular. I think that's a really lovely answer. And I don't think there could be a truer one. So then the final question I have is, do you have any cards in the tarot that you think speak to your experience of neurodivergence?
Hmm. I would say, as I look through, I would say for me, it's a card that doesn't show up often, but my first mind went to Seven of Cups. So that's probably not, it's probably an accurate answer, but like not the most genuine. I think for me, it would be the Nine of Swords and the Eight of Swords. Be honest with myself. A large part of, you know, ADHD and symptoms of depression and just all of mood disorder and all those things, that's anxiety and stress and limited belief are a large part of that experience too. And so I feel like I draw, the I need to take the Seven of Cups more seriously because that's also like, yeah, we need to figure that out. But the anxiety, like it's been such a powerful influence in my life that I'm trying to deconstruct. So I take those cards really seriously when they come up. Like I take a step back, like, ooh, like, and really reflect and process. Yeah, so I have to say like those two for sure, for sure. And the Hanged Man for me, as far as the major arcana, it's an intimidating card for me because I'm like, how can I think about this situation? Like, what is the other perspective? So that it gives you homework. That card gives
Yeah. Or I'm in a Hanged Man year at the moment, and I feel that in my bones of just like consciously being like, and what is the other perspective? My
you.
therapist did something to me like that the other day, and I was just like, do you know what? No, I'm not too tired for this. But yeah, no, I feel that with the 8 and 9 because I think those are the other Gemini decans, and I'm the 10 of Swords. So it's like a little trio that I know far
Yep.
too well. But yeah, I mean, that's a I think that's a very truthful answer and one that would ring true for a lot of people, particularly the pre-diagnosis time of before you've hit that 10 of Swords, and then with like the little like kind of the sun rising on the horizon thing of going like, oh, I get it now. It's like all of that stuff beforehand. Yeah, all of those labels that are just kind of handed to us of, kind of lazy, disorganized, whatever, whatever. And those things that just chip away at us, like particularly as children. And they're the things that can really define what we think of ourselves. And so, yeah, that feels, yeah, very accurate. Um, but yeah, well, this has been delightful. Thank you so much for taking. I know that we've just gone from kind of like, yeah, neurodivergent life, 8 and 9 of Swords.
No, this was
Yeah.
fun. I process things by talking through them, which can appear to be obnoxious at times. So when I have an opportunity where here's a space where I can talk through things, I think it's really fun. So thank you for having me.
I'll be sure to link all of Satu's socials and information in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're taking really good care of yourself, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye.